Welcome to Cost Management Basics. And even though you're tracking the team's progress and knocking down work visualized in the burn down chart ever so slowly, you may have forgotten to consider the impact of your project has had with the original project cost plan. The cry, "I'm leading the team to deliver. What more do they want?" sure seems appropriate right about now. And this tutorial highlights a few simple best practices that, if introduced at the beginning of your project, might help you easily control cost along the way. Everybody has probably heard about earned value. You know, that writing looks almost like kindergarten stuff. It has been exposed to cost and expense calculations that are used to evaluate if your project's on track. Needless to say, budgets and cost controls are key responsibilities for your role as project manager or scrum master. Some management only wants to see project progress communicated in terms of one simple thing: cost. Value engineering refers to getting more out of a project without sacrificing scope. Let me repeat that again. Value engineering refers to getting more out of a project without sacrificing scope. Let me repeat that. Okay, and there's benefits of value engineering. Let's talk through a few examples. It can include increasing the bottom line or profits, decreasing your costs, shortening the project schedule, and hopefully improving quality while you're at it. If costs spiral out of control, value may be diminished. There are two types of project cost and two types of cost usage that you should think about. First, the two types of project cost. The first cost type is direct. This is exclusively costs that are associated with your project. An example is customized UI code development. Second cost type is the indirect cost. This is where the costs are shared among projects, and an example is enhancing your server system throughput. It will benefit your project, but probably many others. So let's talk about cost usage. The first is fixed. This is where you pay for it once, use as much as you want. An example is a fixed price contract to develop product logos to be used for your product being developed. And variable cost usage is where you pay only when you use it. An example of that is contract testing effort for as long as it takes for the project to be completed. Okay, we've covered some of the highlights. Now, what does PMI's PMBOK guide have to say about cost management? Well, there is a project cost management knowledge area. I like referring to knowledge areas as KA. And in this knowledge area, there are three processes defined: the estimate cost and determine budget processes within the planning process group, and within monitoring and controlling, the infamous control cost. And we won't cover these details in this tutorial. Okay, that was fun. But these process definitions are far from easy to understand. They overlap and quite possibly require updates as the project unfolds. This is exactly in keeping with an agile project approach to iterative development. These processes include a huge assortment of inputs, outputs, tools, and techniques, which in my opinion, the most important one is the cost management plan. By far the most important. There are three great cost estimating techniques I'd like to cover. The first is analogous estimating. As its name implies, this technique takes the actual cost of a previous similar project and applies it to your current project. This approach can provide a realistic result, but is probably the least exacting of all cost estimating techniques, since projects may appear to be related, but in reality rarely are. The next is parametric estimating. And we're going to draw this on this chalkboard backwards. This uses a combination of historical data and other statistical models to provide a cost estimate. Remember the old lines of code? In fact, I remember where if you guess the total lines of code times some measure of cost per lines of code, this will result in your total project cost estimate. Hogwash. Oh. There's no way. There's some pretty big gotchas with this approach. To come up with a qualified model, however, you need to factor in the skill level of the development staff, which needs to examine the 10x multiplier that states the best engineers may be as much as 10 times more effective, more productive than others. So this has tremendous risk associated with cost estimating, especially in how you would assign the cost. The last technique is the bottom up. This is where you take each component of work. This is work, this is work, each is work, and you use it to derive an aggregated or an aggravated project cost. This can take quite a long time to come up with, but if your team has experience working well together, this might be a great approach. One slight variation that I've employed comes from a lean, agile approach where the level of effort and cost is basically assigned to a shirt size. It means you've got a level of estimate which comes to cost of small, which is 1 to 2 days, medium, which is about a week or two, large, which is about 2 weeks of work, and then you have extra large on top of that, which is well over a month of work. Using that technique and associating a rough estimate of dollar cost to your shirt size, basically the level of effort, is sometimes as good as any in terms of cost estimating, and it can be a great team-building role play. It's a lot of fun. Controlling scope creep is by far the best way to control cost creep. And you can see that this is not a creek, it's actually creep. How do you handle the situation when the product owner requests unplanned features midway through a project life cycle? The answer I like to use is, and I'm going to draw this, you've got a dog, that's the ears and tail, paws, dog, which represents a feature request. And you have a dog house. So one dog, our dog house can hold 5 dogs, which is the same thing as 5 major features. A new dog, which is this guy, is introduced halfway through the project. Well, if the dog goes in the house, another dog comes out of the house. Works every time. And it upsets the product owner every time. Another rule of thumb is if a project takes longer than expected to complete, hey, it happens. In order to control cost, your team must focus on the most critical feature development that matters most to the customer, and I mean customer with a capital C. If you need to release, even without all the features implemented, at least you prioritize completed the features that represent those must-have items that users expect. This represents the major features that the customer really wants, and this is an example of a feature that is less important. What do you think happens? I'll tell you what. The least important feature at the bottom doesn't get implemented. It's a great technique to control cost as well as satisfying the customer with where cost can impact, focusing on the most important features. So now you know.